11 years ago, I was given less than a year to live with stage 4 cancer.
And today's guest is Elaine. She's the founder of Disc Plus Academy.
And then we lost it all in 1986 and graduated at the age of 40. And yet I didn't have any business on being there because I didn't even have an A-level. 80% of the people that are profiled with me, they are not being their true selves, and as a result they're ill. If you are masking your behaviours and you're not being true to yourself, you will be ill, guaranteed. It's a question of when, not if, it's when. You surround yourself with people who have got the behaviours that you don't have. So all the talk today about burnout, it can all be avoided. Less than 4 months after I had a diagnosis of stage 4 cancer, I was cancer-free, unheard of. And
hi everyone, and welcome to All Cards on Deck. For those who don't know me, I'm Ola. I'm the host of All Cards on Deck, where I sit down with different guests who have absolutely different backgrounds, but they do have something in common. They all live their lives following their purpose. And I created All Cards on Deck especially for you guys who are right now asking questions. Who am I? What is my purpose? What am I doing with my life? I really want you to get inspired by those real stories of real people with their ups and downs, of those people who are a few steps ahead, to understand that, hey, if these people were able to achieve whatever they achieved, I can do the same. And All Cards on Deck has a little twist at the end. We are actually playing a card game, and it's called We Are Not Really Strangers. And these cards, they have random personal questions on them. And this is how we're getting to know our guests from a different angle, beyond what they do, beyond their purpose. And today's guest is Elaine. She's the founder of Disc Plus Academy. And when I read her story, I was so fascinated. Such a roller coaster with all the ups and downs, health-wise, business-wise. And no matter what, she was able to find herself on the other side as a winner. And now she's inspiring people with her story from her own experience and sharing her knowledge with her clients and people around. And I am so curious to dive into all of those matters, how she got there, how she got out of it. And yeah, so excited for this conversation, Elaine. Thank you so much for joining All Cards on Deck today.
And thank you for inviting me, Ola. It's been a pleasure to get to know you. Let's crack on.
Let's get into it. So the first question that I ask all my guests is, who are you?
Okay, how long have you got, really? So who am I?
I know it could be a very long answer, but let it flow.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll be 70 in February. So I'm usually the oldest person in the room. And I've done so many different things over the years that I've kind of reinvented myself many times. Today we call it being resilient and pivoting. So I've always had the approach that if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, I'll stop and I'll do something else. So as a result of that, I've ended up doing quite a few different things, from starting a kitchen company when I was about 22. I'd already been working for 6 years at that point. I left school at 16 with not very much of anything. And then I had a few jobs. I worked for the local authority. My first wage was £997 per year, which is just incredible. Per year, that was 1973. That was considered a very good wage, particularly at my age. So yeah, I started there, and then I went into London because my friends were working in London and I thought I was missing out. I found it a dirty, stinking hole, hated it. The trains we were still having steam trains. I mean, it was unbelievable to see how far we've come. But then I didn't like London. It was dirty, filthy, horrible, didn't like the trains, etc. So I then worked locally in a garage where I did accounts. I started doing accounts in London for this small accountancy practice. So I was a junior accounts person, basically. And then part of my role was payroll. I was working with under the jurisdiction of this accountant, and I was doing payroll for Hayley Mills chauffeur, and Hayley Mills, the actress, for those who remember her, and she's still beautiful today. She's a gorgeous lady, and her nanny, and the nanny was for her son Crispin, who went on to be frontman for Cooler Shaker. So that's my early kind of claim to fame thing when I was 16-ish, 17-ish, something like that. But then I had various different admin jobs and one thing and another. And then I ended up meeting my second husband when I was 21, 22-ish. And we started a business together. And that was in the kitchen industry. So we started in around about 1979 and we built it to nearly 2 million turnover. And it was, had a lovely lifestyle. We had a daughter in the meantime, and we had a nanny that came in every day to look after my daughter. So I haven't won any prizes for the best mother, I'm afraid. Being an executive style mother is not something that I'd recommend to anybody. But, we are where we are. We do what we think we can do at the time with what we've got, And then I went on from that. We did really well and had a fantastic lifestyle, sports cars, big houses, fancy holidays, you name it. And then we lost it all in 1986 and through various business mistakes, which I can go into later on. And then from there, I ended up starting again back in accounts as it happened. But by this stage, one of the reasons the company went down was cash flow. So I thought I was ever so clever. I'd managed to negotiate a £750,000 contract. Back in those days was just phenomenal. And I was, clever me, not thinking about any side of cash flow. Huge, big business lesson. And then I started working in a firm of accountants, but on a consultancy capacity. That was the side of the business that I was in, the consultant. I wasn't a consultant, I was a junior person again, because I had to start all over again. And I noticed that they also had a cash flow challenge. Nobody was billing out the work that the consultants were doing. So I created a credit management department for them. And I ended up getting headhunted from there to a bigger firm. I worked with Grant Thornton afterwards, and I was there for a few years, and again similar kind of thing, consultancy division, credit management. I ended up being a speaker on the circuit, ended up being a what do they call it, a lecturer, if you like. I was lecturing about the new money laundering regulations in 1993 that were coming. So this was about 91, 92. So I taught myself about these regulations. Nobody was taking any notice of them. Now, when you think of today, the money laundering regulations are so restrictive, it's just ridiculous. But I just went on from there and kind of went up the ladder, got headhunted again and again. And I ended up, I did a master's degree at Nottingham Law School in between 95 and 97 and graduated at the age of 40. And yet I didn't have any business on being there because I didn't even have an A-level. But I walked straight into a master's because I had the business experience. And so lots of other things have happened since, but that's a very, very brief potted history of, starting school at 16. And here I am now at the grand old age, but still feeling full of life. And apparently 70 is the new 40. Let that be known.
Yes, let that sink in. Age is just a number, and I agree with you. And what matters is how we feel inside. And it's very inspiring to see people change their jobs, following their passion, following their heart at whatever age they are, at 40, 50, or 60, it doesn't matter. And I'm curious, right now, what is your purpose after all that journey?
Okay, so my purpose now is creating more coaches as certified coaches within the Disc Plus Academy. So I created the Disc Plus Academy because over the years, everything that I've done, I was introduced to behaviour profiling using the DISC model, DISC model, which is one of the most popular different personality style models. So over 30 years, I've been using the DISC model. And in my later years, I had various different health challenges, which, we can talk about later. And whether we're behaving in a corporate setting or in a personal setting, our behaviour determines our health. So 11 years ago, I was given less than a year to live with stage 4 cancer. I'd had various different bouts I'd had 2 previous breast cancers, and I'd also had a kidney disease that I was born with that never got detected until I was about 22, 23. And I got blue lighted to an emergency isolation ward, they thought I had typhoid, and it turns out that it's the condition called medullary sponge kidneys. So if anybody looks that up, they'll see it's the medics still say today it's incurable. And I was told that, and I was put on medication for life. So in those days, I believed the doctors, and I went along, dutifully taking my antibiotics for over 20 years, if you please. And then I got introduced to a chiropractor in my 40s. Yeah, in my 40s. And his girlfriend was a nutritionist. So she did a hair analysis with me, which I still use today with the same company with my clients. So we did a hair analysis. So she guided me on what I should be eating, what I should be avoiding. He did work on my spine. I've got a spinal defect, again, that I was born with. So spinal defect and the kidney disease, because I was a competitive swimmer in my I was discovered, so to say, at the age of 9, swimming breaststroke. Apparently my style was absolutely perfect. I ended up training twice a day in a chlorinated pool. Projectile vomiting and waterwork infections I was getting was because of the chlorine in the pool. Anyway, it turned out to be this medullary sponge kidneys, not typhoid. And I was met with hazmat wearing medical staff because they thought, I'd got the typhoid, but it was a kidney thing. So over the years, I've learned that our behaviour and our health are so linked. So I thought, well, when I got the stage 4 cancer diagnosis 11 years ago, I thought, well, how can I use all the experience that I've built up with the DISC model of behaviour? I knew there was a link, but I wasn't quite sure how to map it. I've worked out how to do that now, and I believe I'm the only person who's going in the depths that I go into, helping leaders, business people, individuals to just take a look at how their behaviour and their health are linked. So, for example, you've got different personality styles, and we're all predisposed to different behaviour characteristics and different types of health challenges. So we've got people who are externally referenced, some who are internally referenced, and depending on your style of behaviour, but this isn't about putting people in boxes, it's about looking at how you can use your behaviour strengths to your advantage rather than hemming yourself into a box, knowing what your triggers are, knowing how your lifestyle is affecting your health and well-being, because that has a huge impact on our personal relationships, our career success, our business developments, all kinds of aspects. So I've finally worked out how to solve my own conundrum. So here I was 11 years ago, July 2015, I had this diagnosis of stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma. Now, I know that my behaviour pattern got me into trouble because my behaviour style is kind of superwoman. I can do anything, I can take on anything, bring it on, just whatever it is, nothing is impossible. And I have this very positive mindset. As a result of that, I ended up taking on too much. And so now I'm fully aware of my triggers and I can point out to other people. So whilst I'm hugely flexible, and not everybody is as flexible as I am, and I take that as a gift because I can adapt my situation to anywhere. So, for example, when we had the kitchen business, I was dealing with lords and ladies, and we did all Harrods work. We had 4 showrooms in London. I was project managing the whole thing. Or I could be dealing with East End gangsters and everybody in between. So I was dealing with, the ordinary person buying a kitchen and all these extremes as well. Building sites along the River Thames, I can walk along them and point out all the buildings that we did the refits in and so on and so forth. So I am resilient, I am flexible, but that causes a problem because people like me, thankfully there aren't that many people like me because the world would be in a state if we were all the same. But people like me, we don't take no for an answer. We crack on, we get on, we're problem solvers. And very often we tend to overstep the mark and be quite opinionated, and we're not everybody's cup of tea. However, we get things done. So other people can be more reserved and gentle, and that kind of thing. So each of these behaviour characteristics brings with it health challenges. So in my case, it's burnout, things like high blood pressure, sports injuries, because we do lots of sports, my particular behaviour style. In fact, in the last year, I've broken my ankle and I've broken my wrist. And that is a result of me flinging myself around the pickleball court. We're competitive, So when I put put all this together, I thought, how can I help myself, but how can I help other people? So I then worked out how I could match and map the disc behavioral profile styles to the health. So I knew that my behaviour pattern had got me into trouble with stage 4 cancer. I wasn't listening. I'd had 2 previous breast cancers. I'd had surgery and all sorts of things. And then it dawned on me one day the how each style is predisposed to certain conditions. So I went down the rabbit hole, and I've created my own model. So for 20 years, I was using somebody else's behaviour model. When I first got taught 30 odd years ago, there was no internet, there was no computers, there was carbon paper, ruler, pens, dots, doing the maths and all the rest of it, working out all the behaviour styles. And now, thankfully, we have computers. And so I've had my own model created a few years ago, which I openly offer to charities free of charge. I've done a lot of work with students, and I've trained a charity on how they can help with the students, teenagers, help them with career direction and so on. And the model that I chose, the DISC model, I researched all kinds of other models, but I chose DISC because it's accessible for 12-year-olds approximately up to senior business people and everybody in between. So our behaviour style, there's only one of me. I've got students in the academy that are different types of coaches. So my aim now is to build the academy with coaches so that they can go out and spread the knowledge that I've got and the wisdom that I've built up over the years. And we can then collectively help more people. So I offer my system to coaches on a standard flat monthly fee, so they know what their expenditure is and they can use the profiler system as often as they like for however many people they like. And there's no restriction, and they get training and support. So that way I can spread my experience, knowledge, etc. to the coaches. I'm starting my next cohort shortly on the 3rd of September. I do this every now and then, a 6-week program. And then I can impact more people, which is what I want to do. And I promised my mum so October 2015, less than 4 months after I had a diagnosis of stage 4 cancer, I was cancer-free, unheard of. And my mum made me promise. We're not a touchy-feely family at all, but she grabbed hold of my hands, looked me in the eye. She was there when the phone call came through from the consultant. And she said, promise me that you'll tell everybody how they can reverse cancer and other horrible diseases. And she wouldn't let go of my hands. She said, promise me. So I said, I promise, Mum, I will find a way to tell everybody. And it took me many years. Mum died sadly 6 weeks later. And that's sad. December the 1st, 2015, Mum died. But it took me till 2022 to figure out how to help people. So I like writing, and I've created a free platform, which is a health hub, which we can put in the comments later on. And the health hub is a free resource for people to search different health articles that I've written, and they can find knowledge. And I have something like 68,000 viewers on the platform, that they can find health and wellbeing information for themselves. And that's my aim, to help people to help themselves, not to be there as a guide. I'm a qualified nutritionist these days and a biohacker, but I want people to find the answers for themselves rather than me being a crutch for them.
Yeah, I love the allegory when they say, or the analogy when they say that I want to teach you how to fish. I'll give you the rod and I'll teach you how to fish rather than give you the fish
Yes.
every time you need it, right? And with whatever you're doing, right, you're focusing on the behavior and connecting behavior to those diseases. I'm wondering, shifting that. So you understood that, yes, this behavior leads to this disease. How are you changing that behavior?
So we can't change who we are. From the age of about 7 or 8, we are, well, the lid is on. The Jesuits have a saying, give me the boy till he's 7 and I'll give you the man. So our conditioning in our early days is really, really important. The people that we're with, the environment, the culture, the education, the support or lack of support, the fear, the love, whatever it is that we're exposed to, that's kind of who we become as a starting point. That's our we're off the block then on our own. So that's why when you get trouble later on in life, the psychologists always take you back to the early days, what happened. So we can't fundamentally change who we are, but we can learn new habits. So I've proved this again and again with the hundreds and thousands of profiles that I've been exposed to over the years, that the internal pattern doesn't change from the age of about 7 or 8. What changes is the external presentation. So some people call it a mask. And when we first meet people, we don't know if we're meeting the mask or we're meeting the real person. So what I love to see is the behaviour graph. So on the report, we come up with a behaviour graph, a series of graphs. So we have an internal representation, that's our true self. We have the external presentation. Then we have a summary, which is the aggregate of the two. So typical day-to-day pattern, this is what we would see. And then we look at the shift. So the shift between the internal and the external, that's where the health challenges arise. So what I'm looking for is to see all of the graphs looking the same. What you see is what you get wherever you are, whoever you're with, whatever you're doing. There's no change, there's no masking. Very often, I would say probably 80% of the people that are profiled with me, they are not being their true selves. And as a result, they're ill. So that's where the behaviour piece really comes in. And I can show people how their behaviour is changing from their true self to their mask self, and what we can do, what they can do. I can guide them on how they can become more authentic and more in line with who they are. And as a result of that, their health and well-being picks up. I do hair analysis that shows them the physiology of what's happening, the mineral imbalances, the heavy metal toxicities. So we have the behaviour piece, which is the psychology part of it, and then we have the physiology, which is assigned back hair testing and blood testing as well for those who really want to go down the rabbit hole and fix themselves.
Wow. So it's about bridging the gap between the true self and the mask that we have in front of everyone. And
Yes.
when we bridge that gap, this is when we become our true self and start living an aligned with ourselves life. And the diseases, they dissolve in a way because of that.
Yes, yeah. And alongside that, of course, there's lifestyle changes that very often are needed. For example, I used to run cardiovascular health clinics when I was in the UK, and I would be guiding my clients to stop doing the exercise they were doing. Exercise is great, but it needs to be the right type of exercise for your body, for your current situation. So people like me, we're competitive and we do a lot of sports and we want to win. So a lot of people go to the gym and they're throwing themselves around a gym and they have a heart condition. So I was showing, I have a device that I can tell what's happening with the heart, the arteries and so on. And I use it for myself now. I don't see one-to-one clients on a physical level. I do what I do online these days. But we can show people how their exercise regime is possibly not the right one for their body. So we have a combination of science, information, and questioning and coaching and that kind of stuff. We bring it all together, and that's what I train the coaches in, how to do that.
Yeah, this is really, really beautiful that you're combining not only the inner world, but also the actually outer world, like what you eat, what exercises you do, etc. So it's a
Yes.
combination of many things.
Yeah.
And the next question is, how did you find your purpose? You already mentioned a couple of stages and a couple of points in your life, and you mentioned that you started working when you were 16, right? I'm wondering what pushed you to start working at such an early age.
I couldn't stand school, basically. Hated the place. The only reason that I was able to get through was because in those days, we had a sports field. A lot of schools now don't have sports fields. But one year I won every competition going, track, field, running, gym, trampolining, swimming, you name it. And in fact, myself and my dancing partner, male dancing partner at school, in the country dancing we used to do in those days, we both won everything going. So instead of having individual trophies, we were given, what did they call it? Victrix Ludorum in my case. There's another name for the man's version, but I had a little shield with all of the, the wins on it. But yeah, I couldn't stand school. I used to bunk off. I used to go to the local cemetery. And years later, it turns out years earlier, my mum did the same thing. So my family were known in the area that I grew up in. And my granddad was a bus driver and he knew everybody knew the family. So I couldn't just hang around the shops or, just amuse myself willy-nilly. So I'd go to the local cemetery in Chinkford where the Cray brothers, the famous criminal twins are buried, and quite a few famous people actually buried there. And I would read the epitaph, the tombstones and whatnot, and I'd know many of them off by heart. And it turned out my mum used to do the same. So we had when I first went to the school, it was all girls, and then we were the first year of comprehensive, and the boys' side and the girls' side, they started to merge them in our first year, and they took the railings down between the two playgrounds. There was a headmistress there, Miss Walpole, and she was a bit of a tyrant, and the floor was a concrete floor, these big concrete flagstones, and outside her office, the flagstone was worn down where naughty children stood outside her office. And in between lessons, when we were changing rooms for classes, if you were caught outside that room, that was a bad mark. And I was often outside there. And again, my mother was. So there we are. Yeah, hey ho. But yeah, so I left school because, and in fact, there was no careers guidance or anything like that at that point. And I probably wouldn't have listened anyway even if I did have some career guidance, but I definitely didn't. And I just didn't tell anybody. I just walked out one day. Well, I just never went back. I just went to London. In those days, I think I had 4 or 5 interviews and got all the job offers. And I had my pick of what I wanted to do. So there we are.
Wow, it's so different because now people with like 3 higher education certifications, universities, MBAs, it's so difficult for them to find a job. And back then, a girl who didn't finish school properly was able to find a job in London and with a pretty okay salary back at that point of time, which was, you said £900, right? Something like that per year. Crazy. Fascinating. And how was that transition from being an employee then to opening your own business and having that business with kitchens? And why specifically that business?
Okay, so I was married at 19, first marriage at 19, and various different admin jobs. And one of them was in a kitchen company, which is where I met my second husband. I was already going through separation, divorce, and that kind of thing. So I met my second husband, and between us, we knew a lot about kitchens, and we started moonlighting. So we would be working there during the day. It was Wrighton Kitchen Furniture, which was very famous, and it was the top of everything. If you had a Wrighton kitchen or Wrighton furniture, it's the bee's knees, so we say in England. So we started moonlighting. So he and another colleague were doing fitting. They managed to get a contract in London on the Edgware Road, refurbishing very tiny council flats. A developer had bought the site and they were just revamping them. A designer was brought in and lots of mirrors and fancy swanky stuff was going on. So Trevor and Ron did the fitting, and then myself and a friend, Anne, we did the cleaning. So we were, titivating them up, cleaning them during the night time, and then we'd go to work the next day. By the way, I was a policewoman as well during this time. I was a special police constable.
Did you manage everything?
Well, again,
a husband, 3 jobs.
Yeah. No, it's not, isn't it? But it's a lifestyle thing. So people with my behaviour style, as I say, there's nothing that we can't do. Our body has limits, intellectually, our minds, we think we can do everything, but of course we can't. And it's, we learn by wearing ourselves down. So all the talk today about burnout, it can all be avoided. The whole lot can be avoided by knowing what your triggers are, knowing what your behaviour style is, and knowing when you're getting to that point of too much. So before you get to the overwhelm, you can see, as you're assessing your life, so to speak, on an ongoing basis, you can see what's happening. Most people don't see what's happening, and they just carry on. They ignore the warning signs and the niggles from their body or their mind. They disregard their intuition, because our body knows, our body talks to us. Our intuition tells us what we should be doing. How many times have people heard, damn, I should have listened. I knew I shouldn't have done that, or I knew I should have done it this way, or, whatever the thing is. So we tend to just plough on, but all of it's avoided. I've created a newsletter recently called Burnout Bites. So anybody who's listening on LinkedIn wants to subscribe to that Burnout Bites. So it's a couple of times a week I write articles and talk about behaviour profiling and how we can avoid the burnout situation, which will save millions, which does 213 billion, I think was the amount worldwide that burnout costs organisations every year. 230 billion. Staggering.
Yeah. Wow. I can imagine. I understand because I had 2 burnouts myself and I burn out, I leave the company. I travel, I find a new job. I burn out, I leave the company. And I was a pretty good employee, so it was not good for the company to lose someone who brings them money.
Quite often what happens is the leadership team, they are a certain behaviour pattern like mine. There's two common, they're not both popular, two common leadership styles. So using the DISC style of behaviour profiling, I'm a very high I, which is that, so DISC in my world is direct, inspiring, supportive and conscientious. So I'm a high I, which is inspiring, charming, persuasive, going, all that kind of stuff. Positive. You know, my glass isn't half full, my glass is overflowing. And I get on some people's, I get on my own nerves sometimes with all the positivity. I'm also a high D. So that's the competitive edge. It's getting things done. It's taking control. It's ego. So the two of those are high energy. And then my limitations, I don't talk about weaknesses. We have limitations. So I'm 100 miles an hour. I'm not overly kind, caring, compassionate unless there's something that warrants me to be that way. It's not something that comes naturally because I want to get things done, not pussyfoot and fluff and stuff, around. And the C is a conscientious. That's about following procedures and rules. Don't even go there for me with rules and procedures. I'm not, never in a million years. So I'm the sort of person that if I buy IKEA furniture, well, I'd get somebody else to deal with it these days, but there's no way that I'd read in an instruction book. If it's got pictures, and I might halfway look at them, but even then I just dive in and think, oh, where's this piece meant to go? Yes. So different behaviour styles. So the two common behaviour styles. This also works for head teachers as well as business leaders. I was part of a cohort of business people that were recruited on a voluntary basis by a government organisation called Business in the Community. And we were there to help newly appointed head teachers to know that they were actually running a business. So like some organisations, you go in because you want to do the thing. It might be selling or it might be teaching, whatever it is. And then the further you go up the ranks, the further away you get from the thing that you wanted to do. So head teachers, they're actually running a business. They're not teaching on the ground in the classroom. They're actually running a business, managing the books and payroll and all the rest of it. So head teachers and business leaders typically fall into two camps. So my camp, which is the ID or the DI profile, and the other one is the DC profile or the CD profile. So both of them have the D, which is the direct, getting on with things, task orientated. My style, I do it with a smile on my face. I bring the people with me, so to speak. Whereas the C type, it's all about rules driven. So There's two different styles of leadership. Anybody can lead. That said, any style at all can lead, but it then looks a different and feels a different culture, depending upon the leadership style that we have. But then you've got the workers, so to speak, the team members. I've profiled hundreds and hundreds of accounting practices over the years, and the leadership people, particularly the founders, every single one of them, there's not one of them that I would engage to be an accountant. And I tell them that, if your CV came across my desk to hire you as an accountant, you'd be rejected because you're not accountant material, you're leadership material, which is completely different kettle of fish. So we have this communication challenge between the leadership team and the people in the business. The people in the business typically are accountants, lovely people, very rules driven, want to do things properly. They dot the I's across the T's, and then they get the job done, but they do it in a slower pace. It's a bit like the hare and the tortoise analogy. So I'm the hare type, rushing off, and the tortoises are the people in the team. But we need all those behavior patterns to make a team work. We can't be dealing with people like me all the time, nor people in the team, because nothing would get done. We'd all be, talking different languages. It's like talking, I don't know, Japanese and German. And this is where a lot of the organizations fall over, because the leadership are rushing off ahead to do the next thing before the team members have even read the first page, kind of thing. And that's where a lot of the challenges arise in the pace of work. The people in the team want to do things properly, whereas the leadership team are pushing. And that's where you've got a lot of employment disputes, because there's a mismatch of expectations, the pace, the they're doing things, the values, the beliefs. I mean, it goes on, and it's not just the behavior pattern. There's a whole load of stuff around it.
But then there is a clash, like what to do with that clash, because these characteristics are my true self. And then in order for me to communicate and have that balance in the company as a leader, let's say, then I have to kind of downgrade my D a little bit and change myself in order for the team to understand what I mean and still do what I want them to do, but also not make them burn out. Like how to blend all of that without changing who I am. Because if I change who I am, then I'm having a mask, and then there's a chance that I will get sick and my body will shut down.
Yeah, it's not a chance, it's guaranteed. It's absolutely guaranteed. If you are masking your behaviours and you're not being true to yourself, you will be ill, guaranteed. It's a question of when, not if, it's when. So to answer your question, you don't change yourself, you surround yourself with people who have got the behaviours that you don't have. So collectively, your leadership team are combined array of different strengths. When I first got trained back in, I don't know, 20s sometime, I started volunteering in schools. As I mentioned, the head teacher program that I was involved with, but then I was also teaching. I co-ran the Harlow Mentoring Network for 7 years. It was a 7-year program. I came in after 2 years because it wasn't working very well. So I used to train business people from the local business area. I'd teach them how to be mentors, and then we'd match them with students to help the students realize that you don't have to have a job, you can start a business. And that's kind of the aim of it, giving them alternatives. I've lost my thread now. Why was I telling you? So I wonder
bridging, like how to blend those leaders and the team.
Yeah. So it's about managing expectations and being clear and transparent. So people know I have a health warning. So on my website, which is called discplus.health, I have a warning on there. Basically, don't darken my doorstep. That sounds a bit strong, but don't bother coming to me if you're not prepared to put the work in. So I'm straightforward. I'm no fluff, direct, and so on. And as I've mentioned, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. However, you want something doing, I'll get it done, or I will arrange and facilitate a team of people to get the thing done, whatever it is that you need to do. Which I suppose made me a good consultant over the years. However, if you're trying to be something that you're not, you will get caught out. You will trip yourself up because you can't sustain it. And as I say, you will become ill. Behavior pattern that's not in alignment. It's about the story, which is why I work with coaches and I train coaches. It's the story behind the graphs that's the important thing. Everybody's story is different. So you can see a pattern of behavior. If there is non-alignment, if it's on a short-term basis, it's not a big deal, but it can't be sustained on a long-term basis. So again, you have to have the coaching expertise, knowing what questions to ask to get to the bottom. And then we've got the health testing and assessments, the lab testing to uncover the real health challenges. So people can see from two perspectives their behavior and their body telling them, because the body doesn't lie, with the lab testing, the hair analysis or the blood testing, whatever it is. So collectively, we've got this amazing information that people can run with or not, depending upon how much they want to help themselves. But it's not something that I can do for them. All I can do is give them the information and guidance, but it's their backstory that makes a huge difference.
And what should the communication be with a leader who has a high D and a team, a person in the team who has a very low D?
So it depends upon the type of industry sector in some respects, because you tend to gravitate towards industry sectors that suit the person. For example, agency will be different to sales and marketing organization, that type of thing. But it's open communication. Doesn't matter what style anybody is. If the communication path is closed, it's not transparent, then you're going to, you're going to hide into nothing. Having everything, cards on the table, which is what we're doing here. It's cards on the
Mm-hmm.
table time. And if you're trying to fudge who you are, if you're trying to be somebody you're not, you will get caught out. Your body will catch you out. Your team members will catch you out. What's the point? So if people know that so all the, I've done loads of profiling of teams over the years, hundreds, thousands of them in 30 odd years. It's encourage the leadership team to share amongst themselves so that they can allocate tasks, whether it's a school or a business or a charity, doesn't matter what it is. And then the team members to also share amongst themselves. So we've got a whole picture. Some clients even went as far as to putting sticky labels, coloured labels on their telephones in the days where we had desk phones and so on, so that people could see how best to communicate with that style. So some people like me, I need straightforward bullet points. Don't give me fluff and nonsense. I get bored and I won't be listening. And whereas other people need lots of soft, gentle tones. They need, lots of caring, feeling type of language. You can tell in people's emails, for example, or their telephone mannerisms, what type of person they are. And on LinkedIn, there's lots of behaviour style things going around, and you can see somebody's profile. The only thing on that, I kind of got caught out recently because the behaviour profile style that LinkedIn told me I wasn't me at all, but it was based upon how I'd written, or how AI probably had written my about section on LinkedIn. So they were words that I wouldn't use. So that was a signal to me that, I don't use AI all the time, because it picks up things that aren't necessarily truly you. So I rephrased the about section to better reflect me. All of this AI stuff that's coming along, it's great, because I use AI to put the behaviour profile report and the hair analysis through AI, and it asks for a slide deck that gives a very easy to understand bullet point explanation to the client so that they can see what they need to do in a nutshell.
Yeah, this is perfect to have a proper to-do list. Okay, this is what's happening. This is what you have to
Yes,
do to fix
yes,
this.
yeah.
And you also mentioned that during the time when you had your kitchen business, you learned a lot. What were the mistakes and the learnings, the biggest ones that this business taught you?
The biggest one was about cash flow, really, and marketing,
Mhm.
cash flow marketing combined. Back in the day, we did newspaper advertising, but there was no internet. We had shop windows, so we did shop window advertising. We did newspaper advertising and so on. Marketing has always been a challenge for any business. Doesn't matter what business you're in. We had high street premises, so we had a great shop window in a busy high road. So we had two showrooms in East London. We had a factory set up. We started making our own furniture as well as selling others. And then we also had a concession in Debenhams and Oxford Street, where we were putting our own furniture in as well as other retailers that we supplied. So each of those scenarios brought with it different marketing requirements. So the marketing thing was and then we had a contract business as well, where we were doing refits on building sites and so on. So each of those had a different marketing requirement. But then the cash flow, at the end of the day, you can have all the fancy this and that, but if you don't have the cash flow to pay the staff, to buy the furniture, etc., to pay the electricity bills and the showroom and the refits and so on, cash is king, absolutely, definitely. And marketing. I think they were the two biggest things. With my personality style, I didn't find the communication a problem on in any of it, because the high I type of me, part of me is is a communicator. So whether I was dealing with, as I say, East End gangster, Lord and Lady Toff, a building site manager, whoever it was, I can mould and blend in, so to speak.
And how was it to afterwards, when the business went down, to find yourself in a junior role again?
Well, I kind of braced myself because I knew I was going to have to start from the bottom. So I started off as an administrator, but I saw very quickly within the firm of accountants and the consultancy division I was in, I could see they were having the same problems that we'd had, which was cash flow. On paper they had loads of money, but actually in the bank it was a different story. So I then took it upon myself, and I became a vice chair of a national institute to deal with credit management. I was lecturing all over the UK, so I was doing things over and above the job to make the job more interesting, shall we say, but also help the organisation. And that's the thing with the behaviour style that I have. Whatever it is that I'm tasked to do, I will go the extra mile. Some people will just do what they need to do and that's it. So that's why it's important to make sure you have the right people in the right roles doing the right thing in an organisation. Otherwise, you have a complete mismatch. Don't put somebody who's rules driven in a front facing communication role, because they're going to be they're not going to be effective, but they're also going to create their own internal angst. They're going to be holding on to thoughts, things. They're going to have gut issues, skin rashes, all kinds of things, because they're holding on to the challenges. They're not vocal. So it's really important to assess people to make sure they're in the right role, and then they have the right support, because everybody needs different support depending upon the behaviour style. So for me, all roads lead to behaviour profiling as a basic, and we can do it with children as well. We can do it with the younger children. Part of the report that my system turns out is animal styles. So when I was supporting the head teachers, one of the head teachers came to me. I used to lecture in different schools and clusters. One of the head teachers came to me and said, "We love this behaviour thing that we're doing. It's really helped our senior management team. However, we want to get it into the school classrooms. And our kids are 5, 6, 9 years old. How do we do that?" Because and as I say, back in the day, there was rulers and carbon paper and all sorts. There was no computers. So we did a brainstorming session, and we came up with animals. So with the DISC framework, the DISC framework, D is the lion, the I is the dolphin, the S is the puppy dog, and the C is the owl. So you can tell for those animal styles. And I used to do a lot of lunch and learn type things. I'd go into schools or organisations, and I'd have people identifying, if they had to choose one of those, which would they go in, and they'd go into different corners, and then I'd give them each a challenge, the same challenge. And then they would see at the end of the challenge, a representative from each of the groups would then present to everybody else. And you could see how the different styles tackled the same problem, and each of them had different outcomes. And, it's very interesting to me. I love people watching. I can sit and have a coffee in a cafe, and I'll people watch. And I'll kind of create a story of how I think the person is in their day-to-day pattern, just by looking at them, by their mannerisms, what they're wearing, their facial expressions, how they're holding themselves. It's fascinating.
Yeah. I'm curious, for salespeople, what should the behavior be in regards to the DISC? What has to be high? What has to be low for a person to be a good sales professional?
So it again depends on the industry sector. Particularly, most salespeople will have a high D in their profile. One of the companies that I trained with years ago, none of their salesmen would even get past the interview if they didn't have a high D. So typically, it's a high D. And C, they can be technical salespeople, because they like the detail, they like the ins and outs of everything, the regulations, the procedures, the technical detail. So, for example, I've bought cars based upon the colour or the style or that type of thing. Whereas a higher S&C, they would look at the last 10 years of which magazine and see which is better on fuel or better on aerodynamics or whatever it is. So any style can sell, any style can lead, but it's how you do it that's important.
And what about the challenges that you faced along the way towards your purpose? What were the biggest ones for you?
I didn't know what my purpose was until recently. My purpose was given to me by my mother, basically 11 years ago. and that is to share what I know, what I've been through, so other people don't have to go through the things I've been through. 11 years ago, I didn't know I had challenges. I just got on with life, and I still do. Every day to me. I mean, I should have been dead 11 years ago if I'd followed what the doctors told me to do. But every bone in my body knew that was the wrong thing for me to do. And because I've trained as a nutritionist and biohacker and so on, and I've done lots of work on myself, personal development wise, and I've done loads of training and listening to podcasts and all kinds of things over the years. And so I know who I am. I know what I'm not prepared to put up with, what I am prepared to do. And at the end of the day, I think, to me, that's a gift that we all have inside us. It's knowing who we are. And so many people sadly go through their life not knowing who they are. They try and be somebody they're not. They try and fit in. I call them square pegs in round holes. And so many people are squigs. We can tell it when we look at the behaviour profile pattern. And when they see it for themselves, it's a real wake-up call. I've had grown men cry when they see their behaviour pattern, and then they link that with the explanation I give them about their health and well-being. And everything makes sense. You can literally see the light bulb go on, in their eyes. One guy went in the very early days of being trained, early days of doing feedback. So I'd read every word of the report, and I'd, get nervous before giving the feedback. Now I just look at the pictures, and then I, come up with all this stuff because I know, 3 years of dealing with DISC. But this guy said to me, I didn't tell you beforehand, he said, but I've been receiving counselling and therapy for 3 years. He said, you've done more for me. This process has done more for me in 20 years, 20 minutes than the therapy in the last 3 years has done, because I can see from the pattern and what you've explained to me how impactful my behaviour has been all this time. Now I know what I've been doing wrong. Now I know what my triggers are. I can do something about it. And he said, it's easy. When you know. If you don't know, and this is the problem, a lot of people aren't taught this stuff, which is why when I first got trained, I volunteered in schools, because if I'd had the support, I probably would have started my business earlier, even at the age of 16, rather than waiting for 6 years until I was 22-ish before starting the first business. But there we go. I always thought I'd be a policewoman though, because my dad was a police inspector and I was brought up in the police way of, everything has to be right. Back in the day when the police was an honourable profession, Dad would be, he'd be turning in his grave if he knew what was happening today. It's a different world altogether. But I did a stint as a special, as I mentioned, and my number was WSC, Woman Police, Woman Special Constable J, WSCJ for J Division 222. So numbers are important as well, and 222 is a good number. And I find that quite often I'll look at the clock and it'll be 11:22, and morning or evening.
Numbers.
Yeah, they're my numbers. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what are the tips for those who are right now in search of their purpose? What would you recommend them to do? Where to start?
Just look at your life. Think about what makes your heart sing. What is it that you would do every day that gets you out of bed, that you would do for free, and then try and find a way to earn a living from it. So I kept trying to walk away from health and well-being, but I keep being brought back in because I get people asking me all the time about, different health challenges, and because of, I've got my reversal stories and whatnot. I can't turn my back on it. And it does make my heart sing, but I had to find a way to make it work for me. So I do a lot of voluntary stuff around health and well-being, but I also do chargeable stuff. So it depends upon who asks me what their need is, how urgent, all kinds of factors. Whatever you do, if it's not making your heart sing, if you feel a bit icky about what you're doing, if you're in a job that you don't enjoy, stop doing it, find another job, because you will become ill. And, it is not negotiable unless you're in alignment with who you are, unless you're in alignment with what matters to you. For example, I've walked out of a very senior job in 1998 because of the values piece. My values and where I was at that time in the organisation, they didn't match. And it was just unsustainable for me to continue. So I walked out thinking that I'd, cocky me, everything would be fine, and it wasn't. And I've never worked for anybody, never done a day's work for anybody else since, because that was my nudge to go back to self-employment.
Mm-hmm. I feel like these big situations that we have in our lives, and I would call them on one hand negative, even though after some time we can look at them as something positive, look at them like something like this is something positive. But these situations happen in our lives to shake us and to tell us, hey, you have to change something in your life. Like when a disease like cancer comes, or death of a loved one, or any other huge events in life, people only then, after this huge slap on their face, people start waking up and reconsidering their whole life. Am I in alignment? Who am I? What is the purpose of me being here? My values, my needs, and what I really, really wish for everyone is to not to wait till that moment of this huge freaking slap and start working on your alignment right now when you are healthy, when you are not in that burnout state, when you are at the very dark place in your life. It's better to start these things now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely it is. And behavior profile is the starting point for me, because it shows you who you are, who you've been all your life, and whether you're masking at the moment. And that can change at any given time, not the internal profile. The internal profile is always pretty much the same pattern, but it's the external presentation. And when we see that, as I say, that's another slap across the face for people. So I'm all about prevention these days, rather than helping people to reverse, concentrating on let's prevent in the first place. That's where my energy is going, and training coaches to do the same. A lot of business coaches, team coaches, executive coaches, whatever they call themselves, they very rarely look at the health side of things. They're helping the individual to follow the goals of the organization, the key performance indicators, the KPIs of the organization, the vision, mission, all that stuff on a corporate level, never minding about the health of the individual. So if they're coaching somebody who's ill at ease, who's at disease with themselves, and they're out of whack with their behavior, they're not going to be listening. They're not going to be productive. They might be showing up at work, but it's this presenteeism thing that they're present, but they're not there. Lights on, but nobody's at home. And that's no good to man nor beast. And again, it results in illness, guaranteed.
Yeah. Our health is our foundation, 100%. There's actually a question from Ewa, and the question sounds like this. How does someone's disc style change when they're under pressure? And what are the biggest communication mistakes each style tends to make in those moments?
Okay, great question. Thank you for asking the question. The behavior style, when somebody's under pressure with their behavior style, they will be more of themselves. They will revert to their natural style. So people who are high Ds, they'll become more bossy and arrogant and dictatorial. People who are high Is, they'll be telling more stories. They'll be more charming, persuasive, fun-loving. They'll be more upbeat. To the point of being annoying. The S's will be worrying about anything and everything, even more so than they do ordinarily. The S style is in my experience, has been the biggest wake-up call in health terms, because they're worriers. They worry and worry and worry. And if they're not worried, they've dreamed something up to worry about. And the C's, the rule-driven, they will hit you over the head with the rule book. So whatever the leading style is, and remember, this isn't about putting people in boxes, because we're all a blend of the behavior styles. So typically we are a blend of two. So for example, I've mentioned I'm very high I and D. Very often people are S and C. And that's kind of how it generally works, although sometimes you can get a 3 blend. So that's the stress situation. What was the other part of the question?
What are the biggest communication mistakes each style tends to make in those moments?
Okay, so very typically what I've just explained about the different styles, the Ds will tell, they'll be very authoritative, and they'll tell, you do it this way and you do it now. The Is will be fanning around with stories and anecdotes and analogies and whatnot, to the point where maybe they don't even get anything done because they're having fun all the time. The S's, they will be very concerned about everybody else and not giving concern to themselves. So they'll be fiddling around and making sure everybody else is okay. They're the carer type of people. Very kind, thoughtful, lovely. Everybody's lovely, but it depends on the underlying intention of how we're behaving in any given time, really, that shines or doesn't. And the C's will be looking at ways to bring people in line with the rule book, whatever that happens to look like for the situation. So whether we're under stress or whether we're trying to communicate, we will always default to our standard leading style, which can be a blend, as I've mentioned. When you have, again, this is what I teach the coaches, when we have the blends, how do you manage that piece? So, for example, if you're within your profile style, you are opposing blends. So, for example, the lion and the puppy dog, the D and the S, they're completely opposite. And this is where we get a lot of workplace challenges, because the puppy dogs tend to take everything personally, whereas the lions tend to ride roughshod over everybody. So you can see easily how those two styles don't get on too well unless they understand one another. And when the S's understand that not everybody's out to get them, not everybody's comments are, personally aimed at them, that's just the style of the person, then it's a lot easier. Professor Daniel Goleman wrote a book around 1994 talking about emotional intelligence. And he identified that the top managers are far more effective if they have high emotional intelligence. If they don't have high emotional intelligence, and by that I mean being able to understand their strengths and the strengths of other people, they're less effective in their roles. So it's about giving people space to be themselves and supporting them in ways that they need to be supported. So the S's and the C's need the rules, they need support, continual kind of schmoozing and yes, you've done a good job and, whatever it is. And then the D's and the I's need constant challenge. The I's need to enjoy themselves. The D's need to feel that they are challenged. If they're not challenged, they'll become divisive and awkward, as I have been over the years.
Well, thank you for sharing, Elaine. Now we'll go to the last part of our live, which is the game. We're not really strangers. I draw usually 3 cards. This is exactly what I'm going to do now. And we start with the first one. Finish this sentence. Just by looking at yourself, people think. So when people look at you, what do they think?
I'm overconfident.
Interesting. How come?
Because I've been told. People have told me that. Yeah.
Okay. So is it aligned with how you actually feel or not always?
No, that is in alignment. Again, as I mentioned before, I'm superhuman. That's typical pattern of people with my behaviour style. We think we can tackle anything. And as a result of that, it's like, okay, no problem. We just bring it on, and
Let's do it.
some people don't like that and the attitude. In fact, I have lost friends even recently because I had a situation happen and my attitude was, happened, can't undo it, hands up. And the other person was quite horrified at my attitude. But there we are. I can't change who I am. I am who I am, and it's up to me to modify my behaviour if I need to do in certain situations. And I've got better over the years. I remember years ago I gave a talk. I did a charity fundraising event, and we raised a lot of money. And I was a keynote speaker. My daughter was in the audience, the first time and only time I think she's ever heard me speak, and she was horrified of how positive I was. And she said, "Mum, not everybody can be as positive as you." And my attitude in those days was, okay, well, I get that, but it's not my problem. It's their problem. But it is my problem. It's up to me to communicate better. And that's what I've learned over the years, to be more considerate and empathic with the language that I use. I am me, this is who I am.
Yeah, and it's beautiful that with that awareness, we have a choice whom to be, right?
Yes.
And when you're talking about being positive on stage, for me, I don't know exactly what was the setting, but for me, I'm like, this is amazing. I would love to have a speaker who is positive, and that is something with alignment. But I'm wondering, yeah, it's not, I guess, aligned with everyone, right? That positivity. Very interesting. What's been the best compliment a stranger has ever given you?
Oh, goodness. Oh, that's a tough one. Probably going back to the days when I got my master's degree. So I did an MBA in legal practice, and I realise now that I'm the youngest person in the world to have this particular qualification. The qualification no longer exists because it was thought to be too hard, and they dumbed it down. It was a 2-year master's degree at Nottingham Law School. I was complimented on my approach, and in fact I ended up giving a couple of lectures to the other students, and some of them were barristers, some of them it was their third degree, and here little old me, I didn't even have an A level, and I'm lecturing
Well,
to these people. And in fact I did a post on LinkedIn recently acknowledging the fact that I'd only just realised that I probably am the youngest in the world with this particular qualification. And the professor who enabled me to go on the program is still around. And I tagged him on LinkedIn, and he said it was one of the best decisions that he'd ever made. So I think actually Professor Stephen Mason paid me the highest compliment that I could have. I've gone all spooky now, actually, just saying that.
me too. I'm getting goosebumps. Wow, this is wonderful. And once again, it shows that no matter what is your foundation, if you want to achieve it, you still can. Like, again, it's not about the age. It's not even about having a certain degree. I feel like a lot of people who are not you would not even think to apply and get that degree because they would have their own personal blocks. But I didn't finish school. Oh, I don't have
Yes.
the A
Yep.
grade.
Yep.
Oh, I don't have this. I don't have that. For you, I was like, let me try.
Exactly. There was
I would,
I responded to an article in the Law Society Gazette. This was December, in fact, December the 23rd, 1994. Professor Stephen Mason came to the top city legal firm that I was the head of department for the finance division at that time. And he came to the office to interview me, and he offered me a spot there and then. By rights, I had no business being on the course because you had to be in legal for at least 5 years. And I think I was about 3 years into the law at that stage, maybe even only 2. You had to have a first degree and something else. I can't remember what the something else was, but I didn't tick any of those boxes. And yet I knew I could do the program. And I thought, well, why not? And I phoned up, got an interview, and I got offered on the spot. And then the February 91st induction weekend, and it was a two-year program. And never looked back. My son was 4 months old at the time. My daughter was 12. Yeah, it was a great time. But as I say, I didn't win any prizes for being a good mother because I was concentrating on the master's program and running the department. I had 25 people in the department and so on. But there we are.
yeah,
That's another story.
yeah. It's not easy to juggle motherhood, studies, and business, and all of this. I can totally understand that. Okay, the third card. In one word, how would you describe our conversation?
Well, it's been interesting because you've been very astute in unpicking some of the things that I've said and challenged me even more. So, yeah, very entertaining, informative, educational, and hopefully people have got a lot from this conversation. I do hope so.
Yeah, there are so many comments. You will check on LinkedIn of people saying that, yeah, the conversation is amazing, saying hi to you. And it was so, so, so amazing, uplifting, inspiring with all your, again, challenges that you've been through in regards to health and business. And now to be at a place where you inspire others. This is really, really beautiful. So thank you for being so open, for sharing your heart with us, your story. And before we end the live, tell us how can people find you on LinkedIn? You mentioned a couple of links, a course that is happening on the 3rd of September. Can you once again recap everything at the end?
Yes.
And yeah, and afterwards also please do share the links. I will leave them in the comments on LinkedIn, and also this goes on YouTube, so it's going to be in the description on YouTube too, all the links.
Great, thank you. So my website is Disc Plus. So those who can see on the screen, Disc Plus, DISCPLUS. In fact, I've just had a redesign of my logo because some people think that DISC is about health and backs, and because I am a nutritionist, I can understand that challenge. But so discplus.health, that's the website. In there's a section called Academy. So on there, that talks about the Academy. And all links can come through to me, and you can book a free call with me anytime. And also, I'm very happy I also host a podcast, so very happy to interview coaches in particular, HR directors, those kind of people who make a difference to their organisation. Very happy to have as guests on my podcast. And there's a free health resource I mentioned earlier on Perfect Health Hub. I'll put links in the comments shortly when we finish the call. Thank you very much for hosting me today, Olya.
And also newsletter, right? Is there a link for your newsletter?
Yes, probably. So I've got 2 newsletters on LinkedIn. One is called Perfect Health Newsletter, and I think I've got nearly 2,000 subscribers on that. And I put out health stuff. And the other one is called Burnout Bites, and I've just started that recently. And already got several hundred people on the list, which is quite humbling actually. And particularly talking about burnout, as it seems to be a regular phrase that people are talking about. But it's sad that people burn out because it's avoidable.
Beautiful, Elaine. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your story once again. And thank you everyone for joining and for being patient with our little technical issues today.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.